I knew something was wrong the second the room went quiet. My daughter had just finished playing the piano, her small hand still trembling above the keys. The final note had barely faded when I realized what was missing. No applause, no polite nods, just silence. And then I heard it, just loud enough to cut through the quiet. A woman somewhere behind me whispered, "That's the poor girl, the one with the single mom." I felt my chest tighten, my ears rang. I couldn't even turn around. I just sat there, frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the seat like it could keep me from falling apart. My daughter's name is Zariah. She's 9 years old, and last night she played her heart out at her school's annual talent show. She wrote her own song, practiced it for weeks, poured every ounce of herself into it. I watched her stay up late after homework, headphones in, tapping out melodies on a tiny keyboard we bought from a yard sale. She believed in that song. But when she played it on stage in front of her classmates, the judges, and a crowd full of parents, they didn't clap. Not even a few scattered claps out of pity. Nothing. I looked at her from my seat in the middle row. She bowed like I taught her, then glanced up, searching for some kind of reaction. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment I thought I saw her swallow it down. The disappointment, the confusion, the shame. I was trying so hard not to cry. And then, just when I thought I would have to stand up, grab her hand, and walk her out of that auditorium like we were escaping a fire, something happened. A man stood up. He was sitting in the very back row, alone, tall, older, dressed in a quiet gray suit. He didn't smile. He didn't say anything. He just started walking down the aisle toward the stage. I remember the way the room shifted, the sound of whispers rising, the judges looking at each other, unsure what was going on. And I remember holding my breath because something about the way he moved made me stop thinking about running. Something told me this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. My name is Maya Reeve. I'm 33 years old, and I've been raising my daughter, Zariah, on my own since she was 2. We live in a quiet little town in southern Indiana, the kind of place where everyone waves but also notices what kind of car you drive and whether your kid's backpack is new or secondhand. People smile at you in the grocery store, then ask someone else why you're still single. I've lived here my whole life, and most days, I blend in. But moments like the school talent show remind me I don't really belong, not the way they do. I work 2 jobs. During the day, I'm a janitor at the local middle school. At night, I clock in at a 24-hour diner just off the highway, serving truckers and teenagers looking for fries at 2 a.m. It's not glamorous, but it's honest. It pays the bills. And most importantly, it lets me take care of Zariah. Zariah is everything to me. She's soft-spoken, all heart. She doesn't run with the popular kids or care about what's trending. She loves music, not pop songs or what's on the radio. She loves strange, soulful melodies, the kind that come from deep inside. She started writing little songs when she was 7, just humming things into a recorder and telling me, "This one feels like rain," or "This one is what it sounds like when someone misses you." I bought her a used keyboard from a garage sale last spring, $60. It was missing the stand and had a sticky B-flat key, but it lit up when she turned it on, and to her, it was magic. She played it every day after school, her fingers hovering like she was discovering something sacred. She'd play for hours, sometimes eyes closed, chasing a sound she could only feel. When the school announced its annual talent show, Zariah asked if she could sign up. I hesitated for a second. She's not the kind of kid who seeks out attention, but she said, "I want them to hear what I wrote." That's what she called it. Not her performance, not her song. Just what I wrote. She was so proud when she turned in the sign-up form. Every day for weeks, she practiced her piece. I'd make dinner while listening to her in the other room, and I swear sometimes I'd stop stirring the pot just to listen. There was something haunting and beautiful about what she'd created. She didn't just play notes, she told a story. But underneath the pride, I also saw the nerves. She didn't say much about school, but I knew. She's the only kid in her class who brings her lunch in a grocery store bag instead of a character lunchbox. Her shoes are clean, but always one season behind. I knew that stepping on that stage wouldn't just be about the music, it would be about being seen. Still, she practiced. She asked me to braid her hair. Nice, but not like I'm trying too hard. She laid out her outfit the night before, her best dress, the one from last Easter. I stitched the torn hem by hand. She looked in the mirror and smiled at herself. The night of the show, we arrived early. The auditorium was packed. Kids ran around backstage in glittery costumes and sequined leotards. Parents chatted in clusters, comparing private lessons and weekend camps. I sat alone in the middle of the audience, clutching my hands, trying not to look too out of place. When Zariah's name was called, I stood up a little in my seat, craning to see her. She walked to the piano slowly, her chin up but her fingers fidgeting. I whispered to myself, "You've got this, baby." She sat down at the bench, adjusted the microphone just like she'd practiced, and placed her fingers on the keys. And then she started to play. The moment Zariah started playing, the room began to change, but not in the way I'd hoped. She played the first few notes of her piece, slow and soft, like she was inviting the audience into a memory only she remembered. The melody floated across the auditorium like a whisper, a lullaby dipped in sorrow and hope. It didn't sound like anything the kids before her had done. No karaoke, no flashy moves, no backing tracks. Just her, a piano, and a story told through her fingertips. I sat on the edge of my seat, heart pounding with pride, watching her close her eyes as the notes carried her away. But as I scanned the audience, I could feel something else. They weren't listening. A couple of parents near the back were whispering. 2 kids in the front row giggled. One of the judges, the one with the oversized blazer and clipboard, glanced down at his phone and started typing. The woman next to me pulled out a pack of gum like she was waiting for an elevator, and then I heard it, clear as a bell. "She's the poor girl, the one with the single mom." The words didn't hit my ears. They hit my spine. I turned slightly, trying to see who said it, but I didn't need to. I already knew the type. Someone who'd never had to explain to their kid why Santa only brought one gift. Someone who never had to choose between fixing the car and paying for field trip fees. I bit the inside of my cheek hard enough to taste metal. I wanted to stand up, to defend her, to scream, "She is more than whatever story you've made up about us." But I couldn't. My legs wouldn't move. My body was locked in place, my pulse pounding in my throat. Zariah kept playing. Her hands never faltered. She poured herself into every note like it mattered, like someone out there would understand. But they didn't. Not that night. She finished with a soft, unexpected chord that hung in the air, delicate and unresolved. Then silence. She bowed, just like we practiced, holding it for a second. Her head came up slowly, scanning the room. No claps, not even a few out of politeness. Someone coughed. A chair creaked. The judge in the middle cleared his throat and flipped to the next page in his folder. That was it. Zariah stood there for a moment too long, just long enough for me to see her face change. Her smile, once small and hopeful, faded into a tight, confused line. Her eyes dropped to the floor as she walked off the stage. I could feel her trying to hold it together from all the way across the room. My heart cracked open. I wanted to leap out of my chair, wrap her in my arms, and carry her away from this place, from these people who couldn't see what I saw. I wanted to tell her that they were wrong, that her music mattered, that she mattered. But I couldn't move. I just sat there, numb, blinking back tears. Because if I cried, I was afraid I'd never stop. I looked around again, at the moms with their makeup and expensive handbags, at the dads filming with their smartphones and barely watching, at the judges, already preparing for the next act. No one cared, and that's when I felt it. A shift, small, subtle. From the very back row, a man stood up. He didn't look like the rest of them. His suit was simple. He wasn't holding a phone. He wasn't clapping or reacting like everyone else. He was just standing there, still as stone, watching the stage. And then he started walking toward the front. People turned. Someone whispered, "Who is that?" The judges looked at one another, puzzled. The next act was supposed to be a group dance routine. No one was scheduled to speak. I sat up straighter, instinctively placing a hand over my chest. I didn't know who he was or what he was doing, but something told me this man was here for her. At first, no one stopped him. The man in the gray suit kept walking slowly down the aisle, hands tucked behind his back, steady like he was used to being watched. He didn't seem in a hurry. He didn't hesitate. But with every step, the room grew quieter. Even the parents who had been whispering fell silent one by one. The judges looked confused. One of them half rose from her chair as if to intercept him, but then sat back down, unsure. The kids backstage peeked around the curtain, wide-eyed. I kept my eyes on Zariah. She was standing at the edge of the stage now, off to the side, half in the shadows, clutching her music folder to her chest. She wasn't crying, but she wasn't okay either. Her mouth was tight, and her shoulders were curled inward like she was trying to fold herself into a smaller shape. The man reached the front of the room and turned to face the judges. "Excuse me," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Would it be all right if I borrowed the microphone for a moment?" That was all he said. Nothing dramatic, no big speech, just a simple, respectful request. The room was frozen. One of the judges, a young man in a maroon blazer, glanced at the others, then gave a barely perceptible nod. A student volunteer handed the man the mic without saying a word. He walked slowly to center stage, turned to face the crowd, and lifted the microphone. "My name is Dr. Elias Monroe," he said, "and I wasn't supposed to be here tonight. My flight home got canceled, so I came to watch my granddaughter perform. But then I heard something that stopped me cold." He paused. The room leaned in. "I've spent my life teaching piano at Juilliard. I've trained concert pianists, film composers, symphony soloists, and in all those years, very few pieces have grabbed me the way that little girl's music did just now." The silence shifted. It was no longer awkward or empty. It was reverent. He glanced toward the side of the stage, eyes kind. "Zariah," he said, "may I ask, did you write that piece yourself?" She nodded slowly, unsure whether to smile or run. He turned back to the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen, that was an original composition. That was a voice. That was art." A few gasps. One parent near me actually whispered, "Juilliard," like it was a word she'd only ever seen in movies. Dr. Monroe continued, "I'd like to ask a favor. With your permission, Zariah, would you be willing to play your piece again? This time, may I accompany you?" I felt my breath catch. Zariah looked over at me, just a flick of her eyes. I gave her the smallest nod I could manage without breaking into tears. She walked slowly back onto the stage, her footsteps barely making a sound. Dr. Monroe stepped aside and let her sit first. Then he sat beside her, not taking over the bench, just sharing it. His hands hovered above the keys, waiting for her lead. And then she began to play. This time, the notes didn't sound small. With Dr. Monroe's quiet chords layered beneath hers, it was like her melody found a voice that had been waiting to echo it. He didn't overpower her. He followed her, supported her, lifted her music like a second set of wings. You could feel the shift in the room. The laughter stopped. The parents leaned forward. The judges put down their pens. No one looked away. When they reached the final note, there was a beat of perfect stillness. And then the entire auditorium stood. Applause erupted like a wave. Shouts, whistles, hands clapping raw. People who hadn't noticed her before were now on their feet, clapping like she'd just won a national award. Phones were out, recording. I saw one judge wipe her eyes. I stood too, clapping so hard it hurt. And Zariah? She turned to Dr. Monroe and gave him the smallest, most sincere smile I've ever seen. In that moment, she wasn't the poor girl anymore. She was a musician. She was seen. And I knew everything had just changed. When the applause finally began to fade, Zariah just sat there, still at the piano, her hands resting gently in her lap. Her eyes were wide, not in fear anymore, but in something closer to wonder. She looked around the auditorium like she was seeing it for the first time. Dr. Monroe leaned toward her and said something we couldn't hear. She nodded once, then slowly stood, bowing again. But this time, the gesture wasn't timid. It was proud, intentional. She looked up with her chin high, and the room gave her everything it hadn't the first time. As they walked off stage together, people turned to each other asking who she was. Parents who had ignored us in the school pickup line were now craning their necks to get a better look at her. Kids whispered in awe. Even one of the judges followed her backstage with a clipboard, smiling like they'd just discovered a hidden treasure. I stood in the crowd, still clapping, heart pounding, eyes full. I didn't care what anyone thought of me in that moment. All I saw was my daughter being seen, not for what we didn't have, but for who she was. When she came down from the stage, she ran straight into my arms. "I did it," she whispered into my chest. I couldn't speak. I just held her tighter. Dr. Monroe came over a moment later, smiling. He held out his hand to me, but before I could shake it, he said, "Your daughter has an extraordinary gift, one I don't see often. That was more than just talent. That was truth. I finally found my voice. Thank you. Thank you for seeing her, for giving her that moment. He nodded. It wasn't mine to give. She created it. All I did was make sure no one missed it. Then he reached into his coat pocket and handed me a card. It was embossed with his name and a New York address. If you're open to it, he said, I'd like to connect her with someone at a youth arts foundation I work with. They offer weekend intensives and private mentorship for gifted young composers. She won't have to audition. I already heard what I needed to. I was stunned. I looked down at the card, then back at him. She's never taken a formal lesson, I said. I mean, we can't really afford much right now. He smiled. That won't be a problem. This is about access. She deserves to be nurtured, not just noticed. Zariah looked up at me, unsure, like she was asking permission just with her eyes. I nodded, trying not to cry. Say thank you, baby. Thank you, she said, her voice small but steady. Dr. Monroe tipped his head, turned, and walked back toward the crowd. That night, after we got home, Zariah didn't want to take off her dress. She sat on the living room floor, keyboard in her lap, humming something new. I brought us bowls of cereal because I couldn't muster the energy to cook, and we ate cross-legged on a blanket like a picnic under the ceiling fan. She played a few bars of her new song and looked up at me. Do you think I can really go? She asked. To the place the music man said? I reached over, tucked a curl behind her ear, and said, You already did. It's been 5 months since the night my daughter changed everything by doing nothing more than being exactly who she is. We're still living in the same small house. I still work both of my jobs. I still bring home leftovers from the diner when I can, and sometimes Zariah still wears secondhand shoes. But things feel different now, not because we have more money or more things, but because, for the first time, my daughter sees herself differently. Since that night, she's been attending weekend mentorship sessions at a music conservatory an hour outside of town. Every Saturday, we wake up before sunrise. I pack a thermos of hot cocoa, and we make the drive together. Just her and me, music playing low in the car, her face pressed to the window watching the cornfields roll by. She's not the same girl who stepped onto that stage, terrified no one would listen. Now she talks about dynamics, layering, the emotion behind a minor chord. Her teachers say she's composing pieces with depth they usually don't see in students twice her age. She still plays that first piece sometimes, the one no one clapped for. But now she plays it differently, more confident, more certain, not louder, just fuller, like she owns every note. And she does. Something changed in me, too. For years, I believed we had to keep our heads down, stay quiet, stay grateful, not ask for more than we were given. I thought if I could just protect her from judgment, from failure, from being othered, that would be enough. But I was wrong. What she needed wasn't protection. It was permission. To be heard, to take up space, to believe in the sound of her own voice even if the room stayed silent. I almost let that moment slip past us. I almost let her walk away from the stage believing that silence meant she wasn't enough. But one stranger, one person who chose to pay attention, made sure that didn't happen. And that's the part I keep thinking about. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't luck. It was a decision. Dr. Monroe didn't just hear her music. He recognized it. And then he acted, quietly, powerfully, not to rescue her, but to amplify her. Sometimes that's all it takes, one person willing to listen deeply, to step forward when everyone else stays seated, to remind a child you are not invisible. And sometimes all it takes to keep going is to know that someone out there sees your light, even if only for a moment. That night didn't change our lives overnight, but it did give my daughter something I could never have wrapped in a box or written into a bedtime story. It gave her the belief that she is worthy of being seen, and it gave me something too. It reminded me that our story doesn't end with other people's silence, that when no one claps, it doesn't mean you stop playing. You keep going, because one day someone might hear you, and that person might be the reason everything changes. So now, every time I watch Zariah place her fingers on the keys, I don't worry about who's watching. I know she's not playing to impress anymore. She's playing to tell the truth, and that's the kind of music the world needs more of. If this story meant something to you, if it made you feel, reflect, or remember your own moment of being overlooked or finally seen, like the video, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that quiet voices still matter. Comment below and tell me your story. Tell me about the person who stood up for you or the moment you found your own voice. I read every word, and if you want more stories that speak to the heart, that make you pause and really feel something, subscribe to the channel. We've got more to share. Thanks for watching. Thanks for caring. And most of all, thanks for listening.